And when I was getting ready to go on my mission, our state patriarch had a little fireside. And in that fireside, he talked about a man who was elderly at the time in the stake, a high priest, who had had a personal close encounter when he was younger, back in 1940. And we all listened with great interest to this because we were of the generation where there were possibilities. We watched the movies and the TV shows. So, and this man's name is Udo Wartena. He's passed since. Yeah, I think it's Polish, but I
He was an
believe, was either
American,
born.
though.
Yes, he was American, and he was. It was almost time for him to get married. He was up in Idaho working for a mining company, but on his own, he was working his own mine. And one day, he was 30 feet down below the surface, down in the rocks, digging out, moving boulders, trying to get access to a vein of gold, and he heard a noise and something like he'd never heard before. So he climbed up out of his mine and he went up on top where he saw this large craft that had just landed, and it was on these landing gear, these three tripod landing gear. And he saw a ladder coming down, and a man was walking down carrying a big hose, and he couldn't have been more surprised.
A man. This wasn't a little green, gray
Yeah, he
dude.
describes
This was a human
two
being.
men, and he said they looked exactly like us. And then they talked about that a little bit. But the man coming down saw him. Now, let me describe the craft very quickly so you understand it wasn't a truck. It was about 100 feet wide or more, and it was about 30 feet high, and it was pointed on the ends. It was a classic UFO or flying saucer.
Was it hovering?
Not at that point. At that point, it had come down on the landing gear. The man was bringing the hose down. He described the man as being normal looking, somewhat youngish looking. He had on a gray jumpsuit, little gray tam hat, as he described it. I forget his shoes, but he had like moccasins, he said. And the man was coming down with the hose, and they saw each other, and they both were surprised to see each other. It kind of reminds me of the M&M's commercial when the M&Ms see Santa. You are real. You are real. That's kind of the encounter that they had. And the man said, I don't know where you came from. I'm so sorry. You're not supposed to know we're here. We're not supposed to reveal ourselves. And he said, where were you that we couldn't pick you up on our sensors? He said, well, I was down in my mine about 30 feet. And he said, that explains it. So, you got us. So what do you want to know? Let's spend some time together.
Man, that sounds so much like the Prime Directive on Star Trek, where until a civilization develops warp speed, we're just not supposed to reveal our presence because it might interfere with their technological progress or whatever.
And that is the point of departure on this. But then it got divided into two categories. They invited him to ask any questions he wanted to about their means of propulsion, energy generation, anything about their technology. And he did. And for 2 hours, they spoke about it. But when he said, what do you know about Jesus Christ and the Holy Priesthood? That's where they drew the line. They said, you know what? We would love to discuss those issues with you, but we're not able to discuss them. We're prevented by our code. So that's how they parsed the Prime Directive.
Oh, I see. So what questions did he ask?
Well, they took him on board the ship, and they opened up some of the areas for him to see. He described the rooms. He described what he could see of the anti-gravity propulsion system, and I've drawn it in my book. It's basically two flywheels. He describes them as about 3 feet wide and a few inches thick, one on top of the other with gears in the middle, making them go in opposite directions. And that torsion field, anti-gravity field that it generated is how they were able to levitate above the ground without any other propulsion system.
Did the aliens, who looked like human beings, say where they were from?
Yes, they did. They described to him and they showed him where they were from. It was another star system, a planet.
Did they name the planet or star system?
I don't think they named the planet. They may have named the star system, but it would have meant nothing to him. He didn't know any such thing. They did speak English, so they did know English terms for those things, though.
I remember in the previous discussion we had, you said they spoke hundreds of languages.
Yes, they did. The younger one said that he was about
There was a
600
younger
years
one,
old.
and how many alien human beings did this man Udo encounter?
Two. There was a younger one. He looked about mid 30s, and then there was one who looked about mid 40s. The mid 30s actually turned out to be about 600 years old, and the mid 40s turned out to be about 900 years
Oh,
old.
now we're getting
And
back to the pre-Noah Abrahamic era, where people were living hundreds of years rather than teens of years,
right,
decades of years. Uh, Now, you mentioned that this was a story that was told to you in a kind of a formal church setting
right,
by a patriarch. Udo
right,
was a faithful, believing member of the church.
right.
So whatever had happened, it did not shake his testimony of the gospel. It kind of just all went smoothly together for him.
Right, for him, there was no problem of people coming from another planet and visiting here. That didn't conflict in any way with his beliefs.
Why would a stake patriarch, which is a position of great prominence, a very vetted position in LDS wards, stakes in LDS theology, you pick those dudes carefully.
Right?
Why was he interested in telling this to a group of young people?
He didn't reveal his purposes, but I do know that Udo had been very reluctant to share the information with anybody for the first several decades. Didn't even tell his wife. Then he did go to the patriarch and told him what had happened. And at that point, he started telling more people. And in fact, this was around the time of the energy crisis of the mid
I
1970s,
remember that.
Jimmy Carter years,
I remember
those
those
long
gas
lines for
lines.
gasoline.
Sure.
Yeah. And Udo thought that the United States needed him to explain what he could about what they had taught him about energy generation. So there was a very famous astronaut who became a US Senator. That was John Glenn. He wrote him a letter and he said, look, I don't like talking about these things, but this is what happened. He laid it all out. He says, this is what they showed me. This is how they generated energy. If you want to contact me, I'm sure that I can be of more use to you. So I just want to do my part to help end the energy crisis. So he wrote that letter, which has since become somewhat famous in UF circles after I wrote my first book and introduced him to the UFO world.
What's interesting is that this story is, I don't know how well known it is. Maybe it's better known among Latter-day Saints, but I've never heard it before. I've never heard of Udo, and I've never heard of this story. But you made a statement to me in a previous conversation where you said you consider this one of the most revealing or one of the most clear events in UFOlogy.
As a matter of fact, MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, they had a big
Right.
conference a few years after my first book was published, and this story of Udo Wartena was presented. And this is a worldwide conference, and they came out with a statement at the time saying that this was the most significant humanoid encounter on record.
The most significant on record, and it happens to have been one that was recorded and reported by an active Latter-day Saint. Thank you for watching the Chris Heimerdinger channel. Please subscribe here on YouTube and hit that little notification bell, or it doesn't do us any good. I wanted to tell you that I am releasing on Amazon Audible and Amazon Kindle a rewrite, a revised and enhanced new edition of 10 Issues Among the Nephites. For the first time in 35 years on Audible, you can get this product unabridged. That is a great element of progress. I would also like to tell you about my new novel, Shadows of Absaroka, which will also soon be available on Audible and on Kindle. And if you're feeling really generous, why not support us on Patreon, where you can get all of these audio and book products eventually, as I get them up there, for totally free. Now, if you don't feel as close to the Lord today as you did yesterday, it may be time to ask yourself, who moved? Chances are the answer to that is going to be very profound and may have a permanent effect upon your life. Thank you for watching. See you next week.